Have you ever wondered what really happened during the American Civil War? What if we told you that there were dark secrets and unspeakable atrocities that have been hidden from history? Are you looking to know more about it? In this video, we will dive into the unspeakable things that happened during American Civil War. Don't forget to click subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this. The American Civil War was fought from 1861 to 1865, primarily between the northern states of the Union and the southern states that seceded to form the Confederacy. The primary cause of the war was the issue of slavery, with the southern states wanting to maintain their right to own slaves and the northern states seeking to abolish slavery. The war was the deadliest conflict in American history, with an estimated 620,000 soldiers and civilians losing their lives. The war had a profound impact on American society, politics, and culture, and it played a pivotal role in shaping the modern United States. The Civil War ultimately led to the abolition of slavery in the United States, and it helped to solidify the power of the federal government over the states. The war also marked a turning point in the country's history, leading to significant changes in social and economic structures, including the expansion of industry and the growth of a more centralized federal government. The American Civil War was characterized by extreme brutality and violence on both sides, with countless acts of atrocities committed against soldiers and civilians. Some of the most notable examples include battle casualties. The war resulted in the deaths of an estimated 620,000 soldiers, and countless more were wounded or maimed. Battles such as Antietam, Gettysburg, and Shiloh resulted in horrific casualties and mass bloodshed. Prisoner of war camps, both Union and Confederate prison camps, were notorious for their appalling conditions, with many prisoners dying from malnutrition, disease, and exposure. The most infamous of these camps was Andersonville, where more than 12,000 Union soldiers died. Guerrilla warfare. Both sides engaged in brutal guerrilla warfare tactics, with civilians often caught in the crossfire. Civilians were often targeted and murdered, their homes burned, and their property destroyed. Rape and sexual violence. Rape and sexual violence were widespread during the war, with soldiers from both sides frequently assaulting women and girls. The exact number of victims is difficult to determine, but it is estimated that tens of thousands of women and girls were sexually assaulted during the war. Massacres of civilians and prisoners of war were unfortunately common during the American Civil War, with both Union and Confederate forces committing atrocities against innocent men, women, and children. One of the most infamous massacres of the war occurred in 1864, when Union troops under the command of General William T. Sherman captured the town of Atlanta, Georgia. After forcing the civilian population to evacuate the city, Sherman's troops burned much of the town to the ground and destroyed crucial infrastructure such as railroads, telegraph lines, and factories. Sherman's actions, which he later justified as a military necessity, resulted in the deaths of countless civilians and left many more homeless and destitute. Another notable massacre occurred at Fort Pillow in Tennessee in 1864, when Confederate troops under the command of General Nathan Bedford Forrest attacked a Union garrison that was comprised mostly of African American soldiers. Despite the Union troops' attempts to surrender, Forrest's men massacred many of them, leaving nearly 300 dead. The incident sparked outrage in the North and helped to fuel calls for harsher measures against the Confederacy. Other incidents of massacres during the war include the Lawrence Massacre in Kansas in 1863, when Confederate guerrillas led by William Quantrill attacked and burned the town of Lawrence, killing over 150 civilians, and the Baxter Springs Massacre in Kansas in 1863, when Confederate troops attacked a Union wagon train, killing nearly 100 soldiers and civilians. In addition to these high-profile incidents, massacres of prisoners of war were also common during the war. Both Union and Confederate prison camps were notorious for their appalling conditions, and prisoners on both sides often suffered from malnutrition, disease, and exposure. Many prisoners were also subjected to physical abuse and torture by their captors, with some dying as a result. One of the most infamous examples of a massacre of prisoners of war occurred in 1864, when Confederate soldiers, under the command of General John Bell Hood, captured Union soldiers at the Battle of Franklin in Tennessee. Hood's men summarily executed many of the prisoners, leaving hundreds dead on the field. The incident was widely condemned by both sides and helped to fuel the growing anger and bitterness of the war. Sexual violence against women and children was a disturbing and widespread occurrence during the American Civil War. Both Union and Confederate soldiers engaged in acts of rape and sexual assault, with many women and girls being subjected to unspeakable atrocities. The precise number of victims of sexual violence during the war is difficult to determine, as many incidents went unreported or were covered up. However, historians estimate that tens of thousands of women and girls were sexually assaulted during the conflict. One of the most notorious incidents of sexual violence occurred during the Union Army's siege of Fredericksburg, Virginia, in 1862. Soldiers from the Union Army, including the 9th Massachusetts Infantry, raped and assaulted numerous women in the town, with some estimates suggesting that as many as 100 women were victimized. Another notorious incident occurred in 1863, when Confederate soldiers, under the command of General John Hunt Morgan, invaded the town of Corydon, Indiana. During the invasion, Confederate soldiers raped and assaulted several women, including a young girl who was only 12 years old. In addition to these high-profile incidents, sexual violence against women and children was also a routine occurrence during the war. Soldiers from both sides often used rape and sexual assault as a weapon of war, targeting civilian women and girls who were seen as easy prey. Many of the victims of sexual violence during the war suffered from long-term physical and psychological trauma, with some dying as a result of their injuries. The effects of sexual violence on the victims and their families were often devastating, leading to stigma, shame, and social ostracism. The medical care of wounded soldiers during the American Civil War was often inadequate and inhumane, with many soldiers suffering from mistreatment, neglect, and even medical experimentation. One of the most infamous incidents of medical experimentation occurred at the Union Army's Camp Douglas in Chicago, Illinois, where doctors conducted experiments on prisoners of war. In one particularly egregious example, doctors infected prisoners with malaria and then experimented with various treatments, often resulting in the prisoners' deaths. These experiments were conducted without the prisoners' consent and were a clear violation of medical ethics. In addition to medical experimentation, wounded soldiers on both sides often suffered from poor medical care and mistreatment. Many field hospitals were overcrowded and understaffed, and medical supplies were often scarce. Wounded soldiers were frequently subjected to amputations without anesthesia, and many died from infections and other complications. The Confederate Army was particularly notorious for its mistreatment of wounded soldiers. Confederate medical facilities were often poorly equipped and staffed by inexperienced doctors, leading to high mortality rates among wounded soldiers. Confederate soldiers who were captured by Union forces were often subjected to brutal treatment and neglect, with many dying from starvation and disease in prisoner of war camps. In response to the widespread suffering and mistreatment of wounded soldiers, the Union Army established the United States Sanitary Commission, which was tasked with improving medical care for soldiers and reducing the spread of disease. The commission played a critical role in improving conditions for wounded soldiers and is credited with saving countless lives during the war. The American Civil War was marked by the use of various forms of unconventional warfare, including the use of chemical weapons, submarine warfare, and other tactics that were considered unethical and inhumane. One of the most notorious incidents of chemical warfare occurred during the Siege of Petersburg in 1865, when Union soldiers under the command of General Ulysses S. Grant launched an attack using Greek fire, a type of incendiary weapon that was made from a mixture of chemicals and ignited upon contact with air. The attack caused massive fires that burned for days, and it is estimated that as many as 1,500 civilians were killed. Another controversial tactic used during the war was submarine warfare. The Confederacy deployed several submarines, including the H.L. Hunley, which was the first submarine to sink an enemy ship in combat. The use of submarines was controversial at the time, as they were seen as unethical and inhumane. Other forms of unconventional warfare used during the Civil War included the use of guerrilla warfare, the targeting of civilian infrastructure, and the use of scorched earth tactics. Guerrilla fighters such as the famous Confederate raider John Mosby conducted raids on Union supply lines and targeted Union soldiers and civilians. Union troops also targeted civilian infrastructure, such as railroads and bridges, in an attempt to cripple the Confederate war effort. Scorched earth tactics, which involved burning crops, homes, and other infrastructure, were also employed by both sides during the war. Union General William Tecumseh Sherman is perhaps the most famous proponent of scorched earth tactics, as he led a campaign of destruction through Georgia and South Carolina that caused widespread devastation and suffering. I hope this video is productive for you all. Thanks for watching the video, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos.